Bam, look who's in the room.
Hey there, Kat. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jill? How are things in Chicago?
Things are good. It's St. Patrick's Day. The river is green and the weather
I
is
saw that on the news.
Yes, it was good to see that we were able to dye the river green, despite I don't think there was a big parade like there normally.
Yeah, no parade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. One of these years I'd love to get there for the parade. And New York. New York's got a great scene.
Yeah. It's a good, it's no Ireland, but it's a pretty good close second.
Yeah, I was actually, quick story. I was actually in New York right before the St. Patrick's Parade, but I had to get back. And people were already coming downtown like early in the morning. Like I woke up and, New York's already a little loud. But I'm like, man, there's a lot of ruckus outside. And there were already people like out there partying and get ready. I was like,
oh yeah,
this really is close to like pushing the flight back and saying, you know what, I think I should stick around.
Yeah, it's got Super Bowl-esque vibes, right? Like you kind of prep the night before, you get up early, you've got your agenda for the day. I mean, it's a rite of passage, at least here in Chicago, to do a
very
proper
cool. Absolutely. Hey, well, thanks for joining us. And this is our marketing spotlight that we do every week. Jill Frank, everybody, is an award-winning executive producer and writer. Was named to Adweek's Young Influentials list. Jill currently leads head of creative agency operations for Allstate. And we'll talk about some of the commercials and things you're doing there. We can't wait to get into that. Prior to joining Allstate, Jill was a VP of business operations and production at Epsilon Agency, where she worked on data-driven insights and creative for all clients across all mediums. For over a decade, Jill was also part of the legendary team at Harpo Studios, where she wrote and produced dynamic on and off-air promos with the OWN Network, Oprah Winfrey Network, was part of the Dr. Oz show, and also the Oprah Winfrey Show. Now, what I really think is cool, though, is your background as a writer, that you also do some comedy writer, and you've done some things with Second City, which is hugely popular there in Chicago. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit, too. So tell us a little bit about your role at Allstate and what you've been up to.
Sure. So my role at Allstate is really exciting. We are and have been for the past year and a half or so, really close to 2 years, transforming kind of the way that creative work and workflow happens through the system. As you can imagine, Allstate is a very large company with something, 40,000 plus, employees from a corporate perspective. And then, another kind of double, just a few, practically doubling that number when you look at, across all of our agent offices. Some of people watching might, have an Allstate office, in their town or pass by on their way home. Not that we're commuting really these days, but certainly you can imagine that comes with a lot of communication collateral, right? So that's everything from a PDF or a flyer or a pamphlet that you would see at an Allstate insurance office, to the branding and the signage of the Allstate office itself, to all of our platforms, the app, the mobile site, et cetera, through banner ads, all the way up to Super Bowl spots, right? So it's quite a bit of content. And I think, the charge that we have is, of course, tied to efficiency and, being good stewards of our resources. But also, as a writer and as a producer, I consider myself to be a creative, and I'm always going to be team creative, even though I've found myself in increasingly, operational and executive type roles. At the end of the day, what we really want to do is make sure that everything is undeniably Allstate, right? So from that experience of working with an Allstate agent, or the experience of going direct, like through the website, that the experience is seamless, that it's unified, that there's a high level of creative stamp on the whole Allstate experience. And so, right, in order to do that, you've got to unify the voice and the brand and the identity. And so that's really what we've been doing, which is great. We just did a big, rebrand and have rolled out a new visual identification system for Allstate that we're really excited about. It's gorgeous. yeah, it has been a lot of fun. Certainly there have been in-house teams at Allstate for years doing this kind of creative work, right? And also certainly we are not, throwing out the agency model. We're still partnering and working with agencies and production companies and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just a really interesting and exciting place. I like to put all the puzzle pieces together and kind of figure out that is essentially what production is. And really it's what writing is, right? You're telling a story. I started in journalism. So it's like, what's the story? What happened? How do you break it down in a way that you can communicate it so that people understand whatever you're trying to communicate? So
I too have that journalism background, and it is so
nice.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to gravitate to a profession like marketing, because to your point about being able to tell a story, but just as part of your journalism training too, is you really learn to like dig in a little bit more, like what's behind that survey, what's the motivation, what's the real story there, and getting into that. It's the fact finding mission, which is really good.
It's the fact finding, and it leads to the truth telling, right? Journalists are always, we are hell bent on finding the truth in the story.
We're very skeptical.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And it's that good. It's a good skepticism, because it's like, tell me more. And, that's where, during my time at Epsilon, I really got introduced to and became a really deep student of data. And I thought, wow, this is great, because this, again, it's fact finding. And it's like, the data doesn't lie. The facts aren't going to lie. Like, it's not about opinion, right? And so much of creativity is opinion, right? And so it's like where you can find that middle ground and balance to kind of have some ground to stand on. How did you find the transition from the agency side to the client side? And I've heard agency people say like you went to the dark side. So you know what? I know it's funny. That tends to be the conversation that people might have. I think it's like, it's just different shades of green, right? The grass isn't greener, it's just different shades, right? We're all part of a larger ecosystem of marketing and advertising. And I think what we're all fighting against right now, or trying to kind of reconcile or figure out, is that we're working with a model that is old, right? Yeah. The traditional client agency relationship is old. The traditional structure of what was needed on a client side and what was needed on the agency side is based off of, the advertising models of, if you like get Ogilvy on Advertising, which is a great book, like not too much has changed from those kind of archetypes of like who's doing what. And I think, meanwhile, the way that people consume advertising, consume content, how we interact as, we're all customers at the end of the day too, how we interact, this thing and these things and the technology has all moved at a pace that like we are now trying to kind of like catch up with. But like, I say like you can't solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's solutions. You just can't. Like we it's all up to us to kind of think of new and different ways. Obviously within the system, like you have to be concerned about the business you're in and the business you're becoming. You can't just say, we're going to completely change everything tomorrow. Stop down production on all the things that we want to talk about. We're going to regroup. It doesn't happen that way, right? So it's like striking that balance between, working with what we've got, but also eyes on the prize and eyes on the future of what could be.
Yeah. And so let's switch gears a little bit. Talk about Second City and some things. I don't know how involved you are. I know that was in your bio and things you're doing there, but with theater and things shutting down, I've got a couple theater nerds in my household, and you got to be in theater to appreciate someone calling them theater nerds. But it's a household of theater nerds.
I was talking about drama camp.
And I wanted to tell you. Remember in your presentation you had Hamilton, huge Hamilton fans in this household, and we actually went to Chicago and saw Hamilton.
Oh, that's great!
Yeah, a few years ago, it was fantastic. But talking about Second City and like the shutdown and stuff, what's the feeling there? Like, are people like chomping on the bit to get this stuff open back up? And what are the conversations? Are you been any of the conversations with on that side of your life?
Yeah, it's been really hard because, obviously live theater and improv is so built on having an audience every day. And even just, the robustness of the Chicago improv community, so connected and tied to those in person, whether that's a class or an improv jam or a stand-up night or whatever. So obviously the pandemic has been really just quite devastating to a lot of people. And, my experience with Second City was tied to writing. I was always kind of doing it. I did the writers program now maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and was very tied to writing. You can kind of do at any point in time, right? And then, the process of, producing, taking a script on the page to actually getting a scene in a show or producing your own show, right? That's kind of this whole ecosystem. But so much of the Second City culture and the meat of what people get into is performing. And obviously it's that is, and if anyone's ever taken improv, it's like a muscle. You have to just kind of be doing it all the time. And so that's part of your craft, is being up on stage a couple nights a week or having a group that you're, are playing around with. And there certainly have been some attempts to do online classes. And I think, Second City is offering a pretty robust online structure. I think is working for a lot of people, but it's also just not the same, especially for those who have kind of already gone through the program and are in, this zone where you're trying to get, more performance and more exposure, on stage. That just isn't here right now, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that community comes back and how robustly. I mean, I think, so much has been affected. I mean, I have so many friends who do, improv full time, who are on, significant stages here in Chicago. And, that was the job and the income stream. And then the backup goes away because I'm waiting tables during the day to do shows at night. And now there's no tables to wait and shows to do. So I'm going to go back and live with my mom in Kansas or whatever is going on. So yeah, it's been really quite devastating. And it'll be interesting to see, how quickly things can move back up, when things can start to open back up safely, and when people will perform, which they will, it will come back. But such a blow to especially Chicago, which is such an improv and theater heavy.
So I'm gonna get a tad bit serious on you here for a little bit and build off of that. So talking about, feel terrible for the people who are, we're fortunate enough to have the type of jobs where we can sit in front of a screen and work from home and in safety of comfort here. But those frontline workers, waiters, waitresses, people who are used to being on stage, comedians, musicians, struggling, right? And hopefully we're going to get back to that soon. How does that feel? Or are there any discussions at Allstate when you're at a large corporation? So would you say 47,000 people, 40,000 people, whatever? I don't know what their revenue is. I know the CEO's combined comp is 20 million. That gap, that income gap that we see in the United States, how does that feel now that you're sort of on the client side at a large organization? And what are the discussions that perhaps you guys might be having internally around those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you'll forgive me because I don't have the exact numbers because I don't have my talking points ready. This was not a scripted conversation.
No, it's not. It's all off the cuff.
But I know, right off the bat when the pandemic happened, and I can only speak for Allstate in terms of what companies, what all the companies were doing. But there were some very immediate conversations to say, how do we help people in this acute, this is happening, and we remember the whatever those initial waves of everything is closed, shut down, no small businesses, right? But even if you take small businesses out, you were seeing corporations do kind of massive layoffs or, making really fast.
And I'm sure you guys insured a lot of small businesses and stuff too. So.
Well, and so for us, our biggest, our biggest product is our auto insurance. And instantly saw that people were not driving because people weren't going anywhere. Everybody's cars were parked in the garage. And so
my insurance company sent me a check.
Well, and that's exactly, Allstate was the first to do it. And a lot of the insurance, the other big ones followed suit, but it was a massive give back program to kind of, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or an economist to figure out that, like, you have cars on the road and you have accidents, and you have less cars on the road and you have less accidents, right? So obviously we saw an increase there because of the decrease of people who were driving, and it was like not even, it was just like the no-brainer first thing to do was to get money back into the hands of all of the consumers. So I was very impressed by how swiftly that was able to happen and move, and how honestly it really wasn't like something that we came out really loudly about in our advertising or whatnot. Because we said, people.
Good. I don't think companies should do that. I think you just do the right thing and people will hear about it. But if you've got to be braggadocious about it, then it kind of looks like, well, were your intentions to use this as advertising fodder all along?
Exactly. Yeah. And we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. So that's just kind of full stop, the end of it. Yeah. And, Tom Wilson, who's the CEO, is a wonderful person and got that right away. Right.
Yeah.
So didn't want to,
And I wanted to ask you about that too. I know a big thing for Tom was really changing the culture at Allstate, talking about being more inclusive, diversity and things like that. What have you been seeing since you've been there in your role? Is it a company that walks the walk and talks the talk in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, this is what I say, in my team, my individual team, in our circle all the time, which is like, and I think I maybe even touched on this on my, digital summit presentation of like
session last month. Yeah,
we are solving. This is an America problem. This is an Earth problem, right? Colonialism, and we just saw the Meghan and Harry interview, and the the racism in the United States, the colonial, it stems from literally hundreds and hundreds of years of these institutions that have been built, right? So like, you hiring a diverse team is not going to solve America's racism problem, right?
Right.
It's just not. And also it's incredibly important, especially with companies and organizations like Allstate that do have power and influence, to walk the walk, right? Or to talk the talk, not just talk the talk, but to walk it. And we have a really robust inclusive diversity team, which I've gotten plugged into in my time at Allstate. Most recently, really great 4-hour session with the team from Create Cultivate. Saying their name right. And it was dismantling white supremacy through design thinking. And that was the title of the workshop. So it was like, you knew what was going on when you signed up to do it. It was optional.
Dang, yeah.
But I was very impressed with the level of programming. And I think our specifically the UX team that I work with, very adamant about, really changing this conversation on what does it mean to design inclusively. There's the hiring piece of it. And like, I like to say, like, I think companies can fix their diversity problem tomorrow. Literally. Do you have an open role and are you hiring a diverse talent? Like that doesn't change, the pipeline for roles that are open. I understand where like, well, obviously, we only have one spot available for 200 roles. And if we hire a diverse talent, that puts a dent, but there's still 200, non-diverse candidates or whatever, non-diverse people. Right. I understand that. But then I think also equally important is maintaining an inclusive culture and really, again, not doing that performative action that talks about what we're doing, but doesn't actually live into it, right? It's no different than what we were talking about with like the give back or when brands do, kind of these acts for good, you oftentimes don't have to talk about it, right? And if you're kind of building, there's a great book called Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal. And, in it, he talks about, what kind of leader are you? Are you a chess master where you're calculating the moves and anticipating what people are going to do? Or are you a gardener where it's like, my job is to tend to the garden so that the stuff can bubble up? And I kind of feel like inclusion and diversity and equity, you have to have the right garden. If you don't have the right soil and the right, like, you have to have the right ingredients to the garden, which is the diversity piece, and making sure that that's top of mind in terms of hiring. And, you know, again, the data doesn't lie. So you can talk about having a diverse and inclusive culture, but if you have like 2 people of color working at your organization, that doesn't cut it, right? Or, you know, and then, you know, again, also what my session at DS was about was like, you know, it's intersectionality, right? So diversity is not just black and white, male, female. It's the intersectionality of all of that, right? And so you can say, wow, look, we're really, really great on diversity because we've got like, you know, 50% of our team or as a person are people of color. It's like, well, that's great. How many women of color do you have? Because then if that, you know, like you have the double, or like, okay, what about your LGBT, you know, plus community? And, you know, where's the intersectionality of all of those things? That's kind of the diversity 2.0 that we're trying to kind of all get to and understand. Not that, you know, kind of the 1.0 metric of like, great, you check a box for us, come on over.
And what did you say the title of that meeting or that session was? But
dismantling white supremacy through design thinking.
I'm fascinated by that.
It was great. It was awesome. I'll send you a link to the team who facilitated, because they were just, I mean, I felt like I'm a big study of DE&I. I've taken psychology classes and stuff. And I was like writing stuff down like, oh, this is really good. Wait a minute. Like they said, you know what they said that has stuck with me is perfectionism, and our standard of performance has its origins and metrics in supremacy culture, because you know, it's that output of like, how much are you performing? What are you delivering? Time is money. Well, where does that come from? Capitalism. Where does that come? You know, and I know we've talked about that a bit on and offline, Kip.
Yeah, the caricature of the rich white guy in the United States is something we all live with. You see it everywhere, and there's no getting around it. But it permeates so much because it's like, to your point, it's been happening for years. It's part of the DNA, and we're not just going to fix it overnight. And it's going to take more conversations, more time. Next generation being raised differently, being in a different world. You know, it's almost like the look who's coming to dinner, right? And that great conversation there, where it's just like, till that generation is gone, and you hate to think that way, but it's going to take time. But you see a lot of really good positive vibes and things.
Well, and things become, you know, we all become that old person that's like, and I'm not to turn it into an ageism thing, but we all like each generation, that's the hope, right? We hope we kind of evolve and improve and become more native or natural speaking in things, right? And so, you know, I even look at the way that my children, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, the way that they understand gender identity and fluidity, the fact that they're not girl toys and boy toys, but they're just toys. And you know, that there might be, you know, they have a babysitter who, you know, like a neighbor kid who identifies, wants to use the pronouns he and his. And it's just not, they don't have to do the mental gymnastics that, you know, that comes with, wait a minute, okay, my first language is English and this is Spanish. So I'm always going to have to conjugate in my head to make the translations versus like, I'm a speaker and I just speak Spanish. Like
that's a great analogy. It's a lot like that when you're balancing the languages. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. Like we should strive for that, but it also doesn't absolve us from speaking Spanish. Like, okay, do the conjugations. I know it's difficult, but we need to do that. And we owe it as an obligation. Certainly if in a workforce environment, when you're working with teams and it being asked and expected to lead, I think, we just had a wonderful session with Simon Sinek. Do you know him?
He's great. We've had him at a summit with Seth Godin. Yeah.
Oh, that's so, oh gosh, that's a great duo. I would love to get the two of them in the room, and
Seth recorded a conversation with him, then played it for all of us. It was fantastic. I'll get you the link.
Please do. I would love, they're like two of my favorite people, who I've never met. Really but he said, he was talking about, he's got like a new book, The Infinite Game and the Finite Game, or I'm messing up the title, but it's about, are you playing the infinite game, which is like the long-term game? Or are you playing a finite game? Finite game has rules, and they have starts and stops, and they have clear winners and losers. In an infinite game, you just have, you're ahead, you're behind, the rules change, the players change. And it's like, I think so often we think that we have, again, these like problems that are finite, that have finite solutions. Like one day we'll fix our diversity problem, or one day we'll fix, the wealth gap. And it's like, no, these are infinite. They're dynamic and they're moving. And it's our job to move in and to say, I want to do the hard work. No, I'm not going to solve it all. And it's my job to solve it all, but it is my job to do my due diligence within my circle of influence and do what I can as often as I can. And to educate myself on why I need to,
it reminds me of one of my parenting philosophies. Whenever my kids complain about their teachers and their teachers and their teachers and their teachers are hard. And I'm like, you know what? You can sit here and complain all day about that problem, but guess what's still going to be there when you're done complaining? The problem.
That's right.
So let's work the problem. And when we can address that things are an issue, then we can all collectively say, okay, well, how are we going to work on it? As opposed to, the key word you kind of used was fixing, right? And if we feel like we have to fix something, then it almost feels like it's like too much like a big project, like something we have to tackle. Whereas it's just, can we just work on the problem together?
Yeah, one like productivity tip that I learned a while ago was because I'm a producer by nature. Like, yes, I have working at the Oprah show, which was essentially, my second.
Did you get to meet Oprah?
Did I meet her? They said?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes, of course.
Like first name basis with those.
Oprah will always be Miss Winfrey to me because that's what we called her in the office. And it's funny because I worked there for 10 years. So I feel like I know Oprah very well, but it was proud to know her because she was, what a great example of someone who lived a brand that lived their truth because the brand was her. And so, we all spend lots of money trying to figure out our brand personas and creating, and there you have like an actual person to ladder up to where it's like, thinking like,
she's as great as she seems, right? That brand is authentic.
Oh, a complete authenticity.
Right? She's a treasure.
Well, and this is where my interest in psychology and self-help and, all of the other things that I care passionately about. And here's the other thing about starting my career at Oprah was that it was a very Black and brown and LGBT, Q plus environment. I did not really understand what people were talking about with diversity issues until I stopped working at Harpo and said, oh, right. Like to have a Black woman be the CEO and to be surrounded by the women and others and people of color and a lot of, really great, straight white males also who were working on content every day that made them very aware of like what was going on. Right. Like, so,
And I got a quick story to share on that. I had interviewed with a company, which is actually in Chicago. I won't say who it was, but I'd asked them in the interview. I always like to ask, like, can you tell me a little bit about the culture of working here? And the guy's first response, words out of his mouth were kind of an old boys network. And I got to tell you, I was ready to go catch the flight and go back home. I was like, not a place for me. You just lost me.
Yeah, this is what I was saying, Kip, in my session was, we've had this very narrow view at the top of the intersectionality wheel that I showed that I would
Remember that? Yep.
But basically, like if you imagine a wheel with like lots of different access points, and on this side of the wheel is white, and on this side of the wheel is black, and on this side of the wheel is male and female and straight and gay, and like for all of these different, we've played very narrow in this top rainbow of what is, kind of deemed the best, superior, or just even the normal, versus all of this other dynamic that's not normal. And we're all victims to it. You could benefit from every check on that box and still say, wait a minute, I don't know if this is the only way to look at life, to look at us societally, communally, to say that this is the standard that we have to then compare everything else against, right? Like we've really got to, that's, I think, our big societal, like lifetime challenge that is our life's work and our children's work. The children's work is like moving away from this standard of there's one way to see things and do things, and it's this way, and anything else is diversity or a departure or a minority or
I don't even think it needs to be that difficult, because as you're talking, I'm thinking of something I went through in leadership training years ago, and you see people do it and they do it subconsciously, which is, if someone comes in a room and you start sharing an inside joke you had on the golf course or whatever, right? Everyone else in the room has now been excluded from your circle, and you might not be doing it on purpose. But when you start thinking more, when you're more conscious of those types of things, right? And I think this comes to what we've been discussing around, like in inclusive workplaces. It doesn't have to be as much as like, oh yeah, we hire minorities or whatever. It's your actions and things too. Again, in an interview telling me, oh, it's like an old boys network. It's like, I just picture like dudes sitting around with their scotch and their cigars and like going,
and it's what world is that something to not be like, oh, I would never want to tell people it's an old boys network because we're trying to change that culture or whatever. Like that. Yeah, I fully agree that it 100% starts with awareness. It starts with awareness, and it's the daily work. I just, this is not turning into a religious conversation, but I was just reading that the Greek word for sin, right? Sin's like a hot button thing for anybody who's, again, not getting religious, but we have all grown up with, we know what it means to sin, right? You did something wrong. But the Greek definition of sin is to miss the mark. And like, that was such a just a shift in thinking, because it's like, right, it's not about you did wrong and shame on you. It's we missed the mark. Like the goal, we were shooting, the arrow went, but we missed the target. And now that to me makes it feel like it's daily practice to get closer to the mark, right? And
as a comedy writer will say, is a joke that didn't land.
Land, exactly.
It didn't land it.
And isn't that like, we learn that in improv all the time, is like, you're going to fail all the time. And the goal is not about like how you fail. It's about having that confidence to recover from the joke and to keep trying. Right. And it's like, we're very afraid as people, as brands, as groups to mess up. So then we don't want to say anything. And we say, oh, I don't want to talk. My company doesn't want to talk about George Floyd, and like, we don't want to talk about what happened. Yeah. This isn't really our territory to get into. But it's a missed opportunity, because
and there's great training from improv there too, because to be good at improv, you have to include the other actors. If you're just doing your own thing, it's like, I don't know how to build off of that.
It's
right?
so sorry about the siren. But yeah, it's like we're constantly we're co-creating all of this, right? And if brands and companies also understood that brands and companies are co-creating with their employees, right? And that's where there's this other great opportunity to say, we don't even know what this could be, because we've never really dug into looking at things from a different lens than this particular lens. So rather than bringing more people into the lens of like, oh, great, now we're identifying as part of this group, even if we're apart from this group, it's like, no, let's expand the definition, and let's expand the point of view. So.
Yeah. Again, when you create your own little club in your own echo chamber, no, we're fine. Our company's great. It sometimes takes those outside voices to say, yeah, great as you think you are.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, we're gonna get close to wrapping up, but I wanted to have some fun here because you work at one of the brands that probably has one of my most favorite commercials, and that is the Mayhem with Dean Winters. Right?
Yeah.
I think Will Burnett created that one.
Yes.
You were at the agency, now you're there. So we talked about the capitalism. We know insurance agencies play a lot of commercials. You can't watch a TV program without seeing one. So we're going to run through them. We're going to run through some of my list of like what I got. I'm going to call them hits and misses. And you tell me if you think it's a hit or a miss. All right. You ready?
That's fun. I like it.
The first one we got is, well, of course, Mayhem. You're going to be biased on that one, but that's a hit.
Total hit.
That's a hit. How about the Liberty and Doug in the Emu?
Oh, the Emu.
That's a miss for me.
You know, it's kind of funny. You were talking about it, Emu.
Yeah. Oh, because it's on all the dang time.
Say that again?
It's on all the dang time.
Well, yes, that's right. But, you know, that's more a victim of other people not advertising than insurance agencies advertising too much.
Yeah, it's just too cute for me. Like, I took my daughter, who's not even a millennial, she's a Gen Zer, to explain, like, Liberty Mutual, Limu, the Limu. I'm like, oh, my goodness. Right?
It's like too much gymnastics for you.
Too hard. Yeah. How about all right, another one, Allstate Smooth.
Yep. I
have to hit the mute button when it comes on.
Really?
I don't know if I hear that operatic one more time.
You're sick of Edith Piaf?
Gotta go.
You know what I love about that one? And do you know what? I had to text my boss because I have this. I left my phone on the roof of my car and then I ran over it in the street. And I'm like, we were producing that spot when I did that. Like, this is crazy. Like,
art imitating life.
We always leave stuff on our cars. So I do love that spot.
Yeah. About Flow and Progressive. Is Flow getting old?
You know, Flow,
not the person. Just
no. The idea, you know, again, it's like these characters and being able to really quickly identify, you know, when we talk about what works, I can tell you from a marketing standpoint what works. And then it's like from a do I want to see Flo do something different? And I think they actually have kind of taken her out of her.
Well, they brought in Jamie, which I think works.
And then when they had all the people working from home, I thought that was kind of cute.
Oh, that one was good. That one was good.
Yeah.
How about Jake from State Farm?
Oh yeah, khakis. My friend Barry was involved in that years ago. I think DDB did that one. And I like. I love Drake. So
the Super Bowl spot with Drake.
The cute play.
The Standard doesn't have lines.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good kind of story to recast Jake as, you know, the Jake of 2020 after.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, that Jake from State Farm commercial is probably like what, 10 or 15 years old now at that point, the original one.
Yeah.
And that just kind of shows you the staying power of a good story.
And the new Jake's good looking guy too. So
he's a good. Well, obviously, if you have a likeness to Drake, he's a good looking.
Right. And I'm trying to think. Oh, can't forget the actor at the beginning of that commercial. Who's the other stand-in? Oh, Paul Rudd.
Yes. Paul Rudd.
He's hilarious.
Yeah.
Another treasure. How about Farmers Insurance and the we covered it?
Yeah, that one I'm less familiar with, but have seen and studied. And, you know, I think Farmers has an interesting, you know, kind of like a standing firmness to them. So this is a departure for them to get a little.
Yeah. The actor that's in there, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Come to me and say, but he actually went to my wife's high school. So small one. Okay. We got another one. Let's see. I don't remember this one. Why did I write this one down? Gabe. Oh yeah, Gabe, the agent from State Farm.
I don't know Gabe. I've never.
All right. About how about the ones with like when they say like a good neighbor and they drop in.
Yes.
Like it. Good. Does it work?
Yeah. Well, I like bringing back the jingle. I think that's a good move.
Jingles are great. Yeah, Nationwide's got a good one too. All right, last one. How about Aflac and the Duck?
How long has the duck been around?
Been around for a while, and there's actually a great case study behind that. If you want to look it up for anybody who ends up watching this or is listening, I believe it was a really small woman-owned agency that created that spot and put them on the map.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a good story there.
Well, and then it's like, again, like those, when you look for a feeling, right? Like Aflac, like you hear it and you now.
Come on. No one ever talked about supplemental insurance until that spot. I mean, really. I mean, it worked. People could tell you what supplemental insurance is now. They'll go, oh, like Aflac? I mean, that's some strong advertising.
I agree. No, it's a fun space to play in because there is, the spend behind it to be able to kind of create those iconic campaigns.
Something like that. I looked it up before we were going to get on, but I think insurance companies, the top 5, which you guys are in, is around $4 billion in spend, and altogether, it's like it'll be over $7 billion. That's a lot of coin.
Well, everybody's got insurance, so
a lot of the world's problems with that money. Anyways. Fantastic, Joe. This was awesome. We went a little bit over, but you had some fantastic answers to my questions, and it was good chatting with you. And we hope to see you at a digital summit again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Kip. And thank you for a fun afternoon. It's good to chat with you and just to say hi to my digital summit friends.
Now I'm going to go pretend to be Irish.
Yes, happy St. Pat's to you.
Happy St. Patrick's too. I'm going to end the broadcast, but stick around. I want to ask you a question.
Yes, awesome. Thanks.